So welcome and thank everyone for being here this evening. I'm joined with my very special guest who got past his computer problems. He's a member of the forum, as you mentioned, Dave Alba. He goes by the forum username is Wetfly. I've known Dave for quite a long time. We actually would connect at the fly fishing shows, usually in Edison, New Jersey, and haven't had those for a little bit, but glad that we can connect on a call like this. And I think we're even talking about getting together for some fishing somewhere along the way here. So we'll probably see each other this spring pretty soon. As I mentioned earlier, while we were waiting, I was thinking about trying to put together some people who I thought would be really good speakers for us to listen to and present about with some expertise and where they fish and what they know. And there's probably no better person I know than Dave to talk about central Pennsylvania, north central Pennsylvania, and some of the streams we'll be talking about, like Pine Creek and Kettle Creek and First Fork as our primaries. And Dave is known for his wet fly skills, so maybe you can add some of that conversation to some of those streams and how we tackle some of that in April. So just a few housekeeping things. As everyone has it right now, doing a great job. Please keep your microphones muted. If you have something you want to say, if you can maybe I'll keep the chat window up for myself. And if you have a question, by all means, throw that in there. And if I don't get to your question while Dave's talking, I will try to cover it at the end. And if I don't get it at the end, hit me up one more time and I'll make sure I try to fit it in there. So thank you very much for joining us, and I'm going to switch over to a screen. But Dave, would you mind just taking a little minute or so to give us your background so everyone kind of knows who you are and what you're doing?
Sure. So as Dave said, my name is Dave Alba. I live over in Western Pennsylvania, over in Johnstown. I've been fly fishing, probably since the early 70s. And about 16 years ago, I thought, I want to get into the guiding end of it and take people fishing and teach them what I've learned over the years, especially with wet flies. I do have a guide. I do have a guide business.
How quickly they come and go.
I do have a guide business called Wet Fly Water Guides, where I specifically guide fly fishing trips in North Central Pennsylvania for strictly with wet flies. I also work for Sky Blue Outfitters as a guide for Rick Niles, and that has worked out really good over the years. I've guided with him for a few years now, and I really enjoy that. But my home range is in central and north central Pennsylvania, and like I said, I specialize in wet fly fishing. So everything that I talk about as far as the streams and that, I go by the wet fly approach. So nothing against the nymphers and the dry fly guys. This is how I fish, but still, how I do it still can apply to those other methods of fly fishing. And that's about it.
Cool. Well, what I'm going to do is I got a map up here for us just to sort of give us a frame of reference, and I'm sure everyone knows where north central Pennsylvania is, but I do want to kind of zero in a little bit on some of the streams that Dave wants to focus on tonight. So I'm going to drill in a little bit using the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission's stream maps. And if you haven't ever seen these before, they're fantastic to utilize. And they have a whole variety of ways you can look at different types of stream classifications. We're looking right now at the special reg areas. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So I'll try not to add too much zooming around here. We'll keep it kind of simple. And we're going to go into First Fork as our first place that we're going to talk about. So right now, Dave, I'll let you talk, and I'm going to add on the other stream fishing as a stocked area.
So the First Fork, we fish the First Fork in the early part of the season. Actually, we usually start fishing the special reg up there at the late harvest section in March. Actually, my son's loading his vehicle right now and he's headed out tomorrow to go up there to fish. Hopefully they'll have some good water. But we fished that section pretty early in the season. But as far as the stream goes, in a whole, as a whole, I've fished up to the time. The highest I've fished up on the first fork is up at Costello, and Costello, yeah, is right around that area right there. And I've fished it the whole way down to the dam and a little bit below the dam. Below the dam, it warms up a little bit. Early season, yeah, they do stock that lower section pretty heavy there, below the dam. But as far as the rest goes, I've fished it, like I said, from Costello down to the town of Wharton. And right there at the town of Wharton, the East Fork comes in, and that's right there where he has that arrow there. And that's a nice little stream up in there too. The East Fork Sportsman's Club and the Fish and Boat Commission stock that stream too. But as you go on up farther up there, you'll get some wild trout up in that East Fork. But I like that section from Costello down to Wharton. And the thing about the first fork is it's a very broad stream once you get down below Wharton. And it broadens out really nice, and especially for the way that I like to fish. Of course, most of you know now that I fish with the wet flies. I fish 3 flies at a time, and I can really cover some big broad water down there, and that's how I like to fish that stream. And I can cover it pretty well. When you get below the dam too, it's nice and wide down there, and it like I said, early in the season, it fishes pretty good. But at the end, about mid-June, 3rd week of June, she's starting to warm up, and those fish are on the move, or else they won't survive. And then the bass fishing takes over down on that lower section. But up in that special regs area, you got a couple of nice tribs coming in there at Bailey Run, and there's a couple other small seeps over on the other side coming in too. So it gets a nice cool shot of water there throughout the season. And we've been over there in June, and it's still fished pretty good. Again, some smallmouth move up in there, and you can catch some big smallmouth, believe it or not, in that section in that June period.
So Dave, why don't you run through a little bit in April when you're thinking about what's going to happen from an insect standpoint and entomology kind of scenario? What are you preparing for? What are you planning for at this point? So
at the April period, of course, everybody knows that, and especially up in the north like that, the weather is just absolutely so unpredictable. I mean, we've been there, and it rains, it turns to sleet, then it turns to snow. Next thing you know, a couple inches are on the ground. So Mother Nature can really throw us a real curve there. But under some normal conditions, the last I forget how many years ago that was, boy, we had like a 60-degree opening day up there, and and we've seen some fly activity. But over on the first fork, you have your early season hatches, your blue quills, your quill Gordons, and your Hendricksons. And then they also get some black stone flies over there, along with some pan caddises, if the weather cooperates. But that's pretty much it for as far as those April hatches go.
Yeah, they're pretty good. I think you're going back to your water level. There's actually a gauge on that spot too, a USGS gauge. And we were talking about this on Tuesday, is that gauge is right there, right about where Wharton's at, right above the end of the project.
Yeah.
And, I don't know what you prefer from a gauge standpoint that you think is kind of a reasonable water level. I mean, I think that, somewhere around 350 is reasonable in April. and anything above 400 or 500, you're starting to run into some trouble at that point.
Right. And, and as I was telling you on Tuesday, the way that I read the gauge in height. I don't know why I never started reading it in CFS, but I've always read it in height. And it's kind of funny because all of the streams that I fish and guide on, I have those all documented on what the perfect height is and what the high end is, what the middle is, would be the good, the good time to go and fish, and what the low end is. So on the first fork, I go like from, I gauge that one in height at 4.63. That is absolutely perfect. Right now it's running, I don't know, it's running at 5 something and it's climbing. As far as today, I was looking at it today. But that's how I read the USGS gauges. And I do that for all of them. But then that's just me.
So what's your wet fly technique or secret tactic for hitting first fork?
So whenever I go, whenever we go over there, of course, I'm fishing 3 flies, like I said. So automatically, and it goes for probably the other 2 streams included in this. We have, whenever we go north, and I specifically put on, and I've been doing this for years. So we put a stone fly on the point fly, and we put a picket pin on the first dropper, and usually a hare's ear winged wet up on the top dropper. And that just seems to work on that stream. Now, of course, if there's some quill Gordons coming off, I have a quill Gordon pattern that works over there. And I also have a red quill that seems to do some magic over there. And that's pretty much what I fish with. And then, of course, you get into a little bit of streamers too. I got into the streamer game a couple of years ago with the big articulating flies. Actually, I haven't used it up there much, but when we do fish, we fish with some small woolly buggers, size 10s. Mm-hmm. And what's really crazy about that is you can put 3 different woolly buggers on the 3 different colors. So you can really cover, how the fish are going to be taking which fly. So that makes it real fun to fish with those.
I've also encountered that, since these fish mostly are all stock trout in these areas, especially when you're running into rainbows, they're going to run into some, just some things that you normally are not looking natural, so if you're really going to get into a green weenie situation, or if you're going to, run into some more, I call them Oregon cheese, it's basically just a little puff ball of orange. I remember one day I was in there, and it was back when I was young and I could go climb into the water probably at 500 or 600 CFS and didn't have a staff with me. And I remember just dropping in, Oregon cheese right behind every big rock I saw down there and pulling out big rainbows. And, that was a long, long time ago. But point being is that, if you're familiar with fishing some more of the wild brook trouts or wild brown trout streams that are naturally reproducing, these fish are not like that at all. So of course you're looking at stock trout, and in the special reg section there, you're also looking at some big fish though too. So they really, but I think was mentioned earlier is not just going to the reg section. That could get pretty busy there. Is exploring out and going to some other areas north of there, right at Wharton, going out the East Fork, things like that really offer a lot too.
Oh, definitely. And like I said, above Wharton there, we never used to venture up that far. And, it was like, okay, so we'd drive over the mountain from Kettle Creek, and we'd get over there, and the special regs area would, there would be a lot of people on it. The thing about it too is the guys are usually in the middle section of that special regs or down towards the lower section. We like to fish up there where Bailey Run is. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some people there, but it seems like everybody seems to migrate toward the middle and the lower end. I think because it's just a little bit easier to get in there. But
yeah, on the reg section there's the right on the road. So a lot of
right,
people may not normally fish or just wanting to stop to look. You can park on the road right there and look down in and get a good view. But if you haven't been up there before, I consider First Fork to be one of the most beautiful parts of Pennsylvania for fly fishing. That whole stretch in there almost reminds me of the West in the sense that you have these great, beautiful mountains on either side of you, and fly fishing down the middle, and it's just an awesome area to be at. And also, if you're there, and I often talk about this for people who are looking to fly fish, but also you got to consider there's other opportunities of just being there too. There's a lot of, you can encounter elk up there. There's a lot of elk that are sometimes floating around the state park that's there at Cinnamahoney. There's a campground there if you want to go camp. So there's plenty of other things to do while you're up that way. At one point in time I was fishing there, I saw a fisher, which is a really rare species of mammal that isn't even around anymore, that they stocked out that way or rehabilitated a while ago. So there's the wildlife out that way is just fantastic. So you're getting all kinds of things along, not only the fishing too. Hey, a couple quick questions for us here. Is this a freestone stream or a spring stream?
that's a freestone stream. I also forgot to mention too that special regs now is a little bit longer. It goes up to the what is that, 872 bridge.
Yeah, so
from Bailey Run. So they extended that. When was that? 2 years ago, I think it was. So from the bridge down, and so that's some pretty nice water in there too. It doesn't seem to be getting much traffic in there.
the north end.
Yeah. Yeah, so that top end, they just extended that a couple of years back. But yeah, that's definitely a freestone stream.
Okay. Another question: when fishing three flies in that fashion, what fly in the sequence do you find grabs most hits?
Geez, I'm gonna say that it'll be the point fly most of the time. But it's, yeah, just the point fly, I would say. But you never count out of getting doubles on that too. I mean, we've encountered a number of doubles. I was saying that I use that picket pin there, so usually the picket pin is usually a 10 on there, and I'll go, especially up there in the early part of the season, we try to, since the water is a little bit colder, we try to give the fish a little bit better view of the flies. So we're going 10s and 12s. So I'll have a 10 on the point fly, which is the very first fly, and then I'll have 2 12s or 3 10s. So that's kind of how I set it up.
What time do you think is most productive in April to be out there on the water?
I would say towards the end of April, things start getting cranked up there. But remember, from central Pennsylvania, the other streams that I fish in central Pennsylvania to north central Pennsylvania, those hatches are probably at least a week and a half behind. Okay, so because it's still pretty cold up there. The mornings are very, very cold up there. We've seen it, 12 degrees, 10 degrees, on some mornings. And like I said, sometimes we've seen snow, it'll snow all day and maybe by the afternoon, the sun will come out and maybe get some things going on, get some hatches going. But like I said, it takes a little. On the up north, those streams are about a week and a half behind from central PA.
Okay, 2 more questions here, then we'll move over to Kettle. Actually, you wanted to go to Pine Creek after this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you say point fly, is that the top fly or the end of the tippet?
That's at the end of the tippet. So right above the tippet, up about 20, maybe about 25, 26 inches, there's a dropper. That's where the first dropper is. And then from the first dropper up to the second dropper, it's approximately 18 inches.
Okay, so you're not going from fly to fly, you're using a dropper technique.
Correct, correct. So my droppers are coming off the terminal part of the rig.
Okay. Cool. And another question about the Hendrickson hatch. Are they as explosive as they are in other parts of the state, do you think, up there?
You know what, it used to be, you know, we could never catch it on opening day or whenever we were over there. I think I've only ever been over there one time whenever it was on, because sometimes those things will come off earlier before opening day. We've seen them come off in March already, or the beginning of April. And remember, our opening day has always been the second week of April. Now they moved it up to, you know, the first week of April this year. And I'm sure those guys over on Pine and the guys over on Kettle are just chomping at the bit, because if we get some half decent weather, you're going to see some really good hatches come off.
I'd say, from my experience on First Fork, it's gone back and forth. I'd say many years ago it was very good, consistently in the middle of April. It's wavered back and forth. I'm not sure where it has been the last couple of years, but to your point too, you know, you got to be there for 3 weeks in the middle of April to find out if you're catching it on the right days, kind of scenario. So, another stream up there too that I know has a pretty good is Driftwood Branch. Has a pretty good used to have a pretty good section there that you'd catch some Hendrickson on that, and that's a little bit further west in Cameron County. I think we got everyone's questions answered there. Let's zoom out a little bit and try to get over to Pine. Is that how you want to do it, Dave?
Yeah, that's fine.
I gotta find Pine. It's not very big. I'm kidding.
You're still at the First Fork.
Yeah, I gotta zoom out a little bit more. Yeah, there's Kettle, and there's our Pine. That's the Pine project, I believe. Yep, right? I got it? Okay. I'm gonna bring back the stock stream of that so you can see how it flows and follows through over that way. So you want to help us with some of that, because it's a big stream?
Yeah, so as far as my personal experiences of fishing Pine, I fished it, what was that? I fished it up into up at Gelton to Anstonia. So that's the very top end of Pine. And then as in the town of Anstonia, then it turns and then it goes down through the Pine Creek, the Grand Canyon there.
Okay.
And that section up there, I'm not going to say it's narrower. It's probably maybe a little bit, maybe 2 times the size of Spring Creek in width. I'm sure everybody can relate to that. I know everybody fishes Spring. So up there too, and remember, this is a big freestoner too, and it's got a lot of tribs that comes into it. Then from Anstonia down through the canyon, you'll come down to Blackwell.
Am I going the right way here?
Yeah, there's
so here's the project
right there.
Here.
But on the upper end, you're on that delayed harvest area there. That's right there at Anstonia, just right down from the town of Anstonia. Actually, you can park. I can't remember the name of it. That's where the first trailhead is to get down into the canyon, the bicycle trail.
So that's in this section right in here you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's more up towards Route 6, right there where the orange and the blue kind of meet.
Right.
Yeah. Right on the right in through there.
So how do you get into that section down in here, Dave?
Actually, right there at Anstonia, there's a road. If you're coming from if you're coming from Gaines Township down here, if you're coming that
You're
way,
going on Route 6.
yeah, there's a road there that turns to the right and goes back in. You'll go over Pine, and there's a dirt road that goes to the left and takes you right down into that project.
Okay. And that project there is a delayed harvest artificial lure or something. Okay,
Right.
cool. So what would be the difference that you would say that we talked about First Fork? What's the difference, do you think, of Pine, or what are they similar compared to what we talked about?
Yeah, I would say they're similar, but they're not similar in size. Let's put it that way. When you get down into the town of Blackwell, whenever you come out of the canyon, so that's where all the rafters and the canoes come down through there, and that is the first takeout for the canoes and kayakers and rafters right there at Blackwell. Down through there, starting from there down, the water starts to broaden out pretty good. It gets nice and wide, but boy, that is some really wild water over there. Early in the spring, it's, it could be really on the iffy side. And as I said, with the gauge, it better be at 2 or 2.5 to be, to weight it pretty safely. Anything above that, unless you fish there a lot, is kind of on the sketchy side.
So in the way of hatches and things like that, are we talking about the same thing?
Exactly. You'll have Quill Gordons, Hendricksons, some blue quills, and I've seen some blue wing olives over there in early April. You'll get some black and brown stoneflies, and then of course, if once you get down into around from Slate Run down, it's real broad there, and it gets a lot of sunlight. Okay, and so things could happen there if Mother Nature cooperates a little bit.
If you all can see the map here, you realize just how long and big a stream this really is. And there's 2 other projects that are down below here. One is Slate Run, and the other is Cedar Run as tribs. And they're pretty small, but I actually haven't fished Cedar in quite a while. But you can see they're pretty long as well. They got 7 miles here on Cedar Run, and Slate Run's 7 miles as well. But they're in pretty deep areas too. And there's a road that passes up through here. And I only bring them up for people, as I said earlier, if you're going into an area like this, take the time to explore not only the mainstream, and if you do run into a situation where the water's not maybe conducive or the conditions are just a little more than you expect them to be, check out these side areas. And there's a lot of opportunity to check out some really good waters, as well as some unique opportunities. And that's always important to know. What's your plan B? And these would be 2 plan Bs, although I got to say that when I remember being on Slate Run, it's pretty hilly through here, as you can see by the contour maps that we are showing you. And it's not an easy hike in some areas to get down into some of those waters. You got to be pretty careful about what you're doing. But it's a beautiful area. I mean, the whole area is really kind of just something you don't want to miss out on getting to and trying out.
The thing about Slate Run too is it could be there's a hiking trail down on there too, and a lot of times you'll travel up that road or come down that road, and you'll see a lot of cars there. It could kind of be a little bit of a fooler that you'll think, wow, all these people were fishing down there, but not so. A lot of people were hiking that area, so it's very hard to tell how many fishermen are down in that area. And the bad thing about that too is if somebody jumps in front of you, you will not move fish. My son and I was there, I forget how many years ago this was, and we got there pretty early, and and we were fishing up, and we were catching brook trout and some brown trout, on dry flies. And all of a sudden we come into some of these pools and it's like we couldn't get a rise there. And it was like, wow, what is going on? And we kept going and going, nothing. We're coming up onto these beautiful pools. Here we go. There was a bend right there. We go around the bend. There's two guys in front of us. So it kind of ruined, our day at that point. But we were lucky enough to get on there. And cedar, I haven't fished cedar run in a very, very long time. But yeah, that's another option.
So there was a question that was brought up about what's a special project, and I'll try to help answer a little bit of that for everybody here. So I'm going to bring over the layers map. And in Pennsylvania, they have many of the waters that are designated as different types of water, in a sense that these blue waters are called special regulations, and they can range in everything being only fly fishing only, to season year-round fishing, to some of it can just be catch and release. Each one can be different. So you might find one regulation here, this is a trophy trout regulation, artificial lures only, but the one over here may not be the same thing. It'd be catch and release, all tackle. But generally they're stocked streams for the most part, and they are generally streams that are open year-round, but they're very limited in their scope. So anywhere between a mile to, in this case, 7 miles of an area. The other most typical stream you're going to run into, and it's checked off here for us already, is the stocked, and that's the orange one. And you can see in Pennsylvania, there's hundreds of miles of stocked streams in the area. So you can see that we're looking in the north central area with Potter and Tioga and Clinton counties and Lycoming, with Penn State being just right down here on the bottom of my arrow. The blues are these special projects, Penns Creek being one, Spring Creek being another, are pretty common names. And then the orange ones are stocked streams that are opening season and a closed season during typically the year. Now there's other streams as well. Class A trout streams are these green ones, and Class A's are simply naturally reproducing waters. If I got that right, you want to share that one for me?
Right.
Yeah, and then they also have wilderness trout streams, which are even more special, more designated as brook trout streams in a wild area. And then we have natural reproduction trout streams. So, Pennsylvania is, especially up in this area, is littered with all types of streams. And if you're fishing there in April, you can fish any one of these, basically, is what it comes down to. But this map gives you kind of an indication. That's why I'm turning off so many of these streams, because there's so much of it we're not covering and cannot cover, and what's going on. Let's turn off the Class A and go back to the special regs. Do you want to get over to Kettle?
Yeah.
Okay. So in leaving Pine, it's a pretty big stream. It's not really a stream, it's almost a river. And probably you'd be well served with a float trip on that one, if that was part of something you could figure out and make that work. I'm sure you'd do pretty well with that. So Kettle, moving over here. So Pine was off to our east side. We were down in the west side was First Fork. And in the middle here is another beautiful valley where Kettle Creek is. And you can see Kettle Creek has a couple different sections in here. And Dave, you want to cover that for us with
Sure.
Kettle?
So right there where you're holding your arrow, right on the Clinton County, Potter County line, almost exactly where the arrow was. I have a camp there. I've been in the valley there for a little over 30 years now. So our place sets a little bit below Cross Forks. And this is what I consider my home water whenever I'm in the big woods. We spend a lot of our time on this stream, and we have fished it from top to bottom. And we've also fished its tributaries too. And of course, again, Kettle is another free stoner. It's not as big as the First Fork. It's a little bit smaller than the First Fork. But when you get down in Clinton County there, above the dam, It broadens out a little bit down there. Excellent for the way that we fish. You know, throwing wet flies. Not saying that we don't do that up in Potter County too, but it's a little bit narrower up in Potter County. It has a nice project right there that they stock very heavily at the catch and release fly fishing only. They stock that under that pretty heavy. The 144 crosses that right there at the project. Now we consider that the low end of the the lower end of the project. I guess it all depends which way you're coming, but we're always traveling upstream whenever we go up above the fish. But that's the lower section of that catch and release area, and a few miles up the road is, and it's very well marked. They did some projects up on there, enhancement projects. The Kettle Creek Water Association put some devices up in there, and they're doing some really nice work up there. They're also doing some work on the tributaries too, to enhance the area. And again, in that April, probably the hatch that I've seen the best there a couple of times, of course, on opening day, was the Quill Gordons there. And actually, the Quill Gordon on there looks almost identical to a slate drake dun. And I kind of questioned that. And I thought, wow, whenever I first seen them years ago, and I thought, wow, what the heck is slate drakes hatching on here this early? So I happened to nab one, and I went down to Phil Baldacchino's fly shop there, and I talked to him, and he told me, yeah, those are definitely Quill Gordons. And oh my God, them stockfish were just gorging themselves on them. So again, right place at the right time. On the upper end, it's been over 20 years ago. And actually it was at the end of March. I seen one of the biggest Hendrickson hatches right above the top end of the fly project there.
Yeah, up in here.
Yeah, and all those fish were just tearing it up. But I've never seen anything, I've never seen a big Hendrickson hatch after that. And like I said, it was just, the water temperature was just right, and things were happening.
Yeah, Kettle is another long section of water that has a lot of good access to it. 144 pretty much follows it all the way through. In the areas we've talked about, there are two campground areas, state park campground areas. One down here by Kettle Creek. I stayed there a couple summers ago. And then there's another one up top here by the project as well. And really this stretch all the way from down by the state park all the way to the top up here is accessible, A, and B, there is plenty of roadway to follow all the way through. Now, of course, you can't stop everywhere. You have there's private camps and things like that along the way, but there are definitely pull-offs, and some areas are a little steep, you just can't climb down into. But there's plenty of good parking up around this area, and there's some good parking up top. And do you want to talk a bit about this other stretch up here, this project area, and the what they call them? That's a new project area. I'll scroll into that one a little bit.
Yeah, that's on the upper. That's the headwaters of Kettle.
Yeah.
So and you can see you have Long Run coming in there. You have Indian Run coming in, and then also probably the biggest one right there is the Germania branch. That has a very nice project on. Actually, I think it was last year. I don't know if it was the God's Country TU that worked up there, but my son and I was hunting up there this past fall, and they dropped a lot of trees in that section, that Germania section, to enhance the water and put some cover in for the fish. So that really is going to make that real nice. Actually, I seen that the stumps were still pretty white, and So that just recently happened. They also did it too down on the Hammersley Fork Creek too.
That's down. That's down closer to
Yeah.
Cross Fork. Yeah, I'll show that area again to everybody.
But this end of the stream up here is pretty small. This is some nice dry fly water up here.
Yeah.
And,
This is some rough area though.
oh yeah, when you get into that long run and that Indian run, and there's that slider branch, and that can be that's some hiking in areas.
So Route 144 is a nice road, paved road. And I parked right here just at the start of the project. And actually, and one of the other moderators, Maurice and I, were up there in the summer. We hiked back up in here. And we only got about, I'd say, a half mile to a mile. We didn't get real far. But it's some heavy brush, heavy cover in there, especially in the summertime. So springtime and April would be easy to get to, but it's not for the faint of heart, I would imagine. And then there's a road that comes over off the top up here that would take you back into this section down here, I believe. Isn't that right? The Sliders branch.
Right.
And is that a 4-wheel drive road, or is that?
I think so, but there's that road that comes off of the top of Pine Mountain that goes down to that where the Germania branch dumps in. Mm-hmm. There's a dirt road that winds around down to the bottom off the top of that.
Yeah, again, a really fun area to explore. Not as easy to access and get to than the lower sections. But if you're looking for an adventure, and I probably really do mean an adventure, this would be a place to go to. And you're not going to run into anybody up in this area either. Now, is this stocked, Dave?
Up at the Germania branch,
mm-hmm.
that's stocked up there. That upper end is from right there at 144 up.
Yeah.
That's all wild. That's all wild fish.
Okay.
They quit stocking right there at the bridge, right there where you said you parked.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where the stocking ends. They don't stock any fish up there.
Yeah.
Now, whenever they come down over the mountain to go towards the Germania branch at that bridge there, they stock upstream and downstream, and then they also stock from Germania coming back that way to the bridge. So you can take that road the whole way out, and it'll bring you into the town of Germania.
Got it. So going back to hatches and things like that, I'm assuming we're going to still the same kind of thing, mid-season, mid-April kind of Quill Gordons and Hendrickson, depending on what's going on, the type of day. And Hendrickson actually hatch during the middle of the day, don't they?
Yeah. Yes.
So they're a midday hatch.
And the same way with those Quill Gordons too. I've seen them, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
And like I said, if that water temperature is right, they'll stay on for a while.
Yeah. A couple of questions coming in. So this is a question about how you fish, Dave, with are you using a tippet ring in any of your process when you're tying any of those flies on?
No tippet rings. I tie dropper loops in the terminal part of my leader. And if you don't know what a dropper loop is you can Google that up, and it'll take you right there, and actually it'll show you on there how to tie it, how to tie the loop. And then I come off of that dropper loop with my dropper material. Now my dropper material is 0.015, okay, and that's about 25, 26 pound test. So it's real nice and stiff. So it keeps the flies out to the side, and everybody looks at that system and they go, "There's no way that you're catching fish on them droppers because that material is too big." But it works. The other thing too is a lot of times guys won't believe about the droppers. they want to go with something thinner. Well, the next thing you know, you have a terminal, you have that piece of dropper wrapping around the terminal part of the leader all the time. So with that 0.015, it keeps it out to the side. So when I make my cast, it either unravels in the air or it unravels in the water to keep the fly out to the side. And believe me, I've caught numerous doubles over the years. My son, he catches a lot of doubles on it too.
So on your dropper line, we had a question where someone didn't quite hear what you said. Did you say 0.015 or 0.15?
No, 0.015.
0.015. Okay. All right. What kind of rig are you talking about? Obviously, you've talked about your dropper setup. 5-weight. What?
Correct. So my setup is of course I kind of stay to the traditional side of the method. So of course I fish with bamboo, but in the early days I fished with a medium action rod. A medium action rod will work perfectly. The thing is you want to have a slow tip action on it too. But like I said, I cut my teeth on a medium action rod until I switched over to bamboo. Now my bamboo is, it's fast at the butt, it's medium through the center, and it's slow at the tip. And it's whenever I had the thing made, the guy told me, he says, whenever you make that cast, he says, you probably could eat half a sandwich by the time you're ready to bring that line forward, So you have to slow your casting down. Remember, you're throwing 3 flies. Okay. You got to create a nice open loop when you cast. And it's really tough for guys that have fished nymphs and dries a lot because your casting stroke is a lot faster. Here, you have to slow down. And remember, like I said, you got them 2 droppers hanging down. If you make a tight loop on that, one of those droppers is going to catch the terminal part of the leader every single time. So it's very important to slow the cast down.
Cool.
The fly line that I use, 99% of the time it's an intermediate sinking line. It sinks 1 inch to 1.5 inches a second. Now, when the water goes lower, what I'll do is I'll switch over to a floating line to achieve the same thing. So,
what's and on Kettle, what is the stream gauge level that you think is reasonable for April?
We like the ideal is at least at 2 foot or 1.80. Okay, that's what we like it. The lowest that we like to fish it is about 1.25. If you get 2.5, when you get into 3 feet, you might as well stay home or stay in camp and drink beer because you're not going to get on it at 3 feet. It's tough. I mean, it has some good moving water on it too.
And where would people go if they were going to have to go to a bar around there?
They would want to go up to Kenny's or up to Deb's.
Yeah.
That's the only 2 places in the area. And don't come to my place.
I was going to ask you your address.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean,
yeah, but yeah, that's the only 2 bars in.
Actually, Deb's is probably one of the most famous fly fishing joints in Pennsylvania. So if you're ever up in that area, you got to stop in there, and they have a hamburger or a special burger you got to grab in there, as well as a beer. And it's probably one of the best places to hit in June on an afternoon about 1 o'clock when the fish are biting and you're ready to go get a cold beer and a burger, is go to Deb's.
Yeah,
it's right on one.
You just don't want to go there around 8 o'clock because you'll never get a parking place in the parking lot. That's how packed it is on
right there. Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
couple more questions. We'll wrap things up. If anybody has a question, please add that into the chat there before we wrap up. So one of the questions is, do you ever use sinking leaders?
No.
Okay.
Actually, that's what I have the intermediate sinking line for. So my fly line is the backbone of the system. That's what's taking the flies down. And that leader is a 9-foot leader too. Now, let's talk early season in that April period. What we'll do is we'll scale that leader down to maybe a 7.5 or a 5-foot leader so that we can get the flies, down to the fish. Remember, in April, especially up north, that water is cold. I mean, and that's why the bait guys and the spinner guys do so good up there at the beginning of the season, because they're getting their lures, or they're getting their baits down close to the bottom. And but we'll achieve that by a full sinking line too. Okay, we'll use a full sinker, class 5 sinking line, sinks about 6 inches a second, and when we'll get those flies down. So technically what we did is we just shortened up the leader, and sometimes we'll rig it up for 3 flies on that 5-foot leader, but most of the time it's 2 flies. In the same way with the 7.5, I'll modify that leader to use 3 flies too. But like I said, we're using that full sinking line. Now, whenever the good time comes, in that May and June period, and the water levels drop, I'm going back to that intermediate sinking line. Okay, I won't ever put on the full sinker at that time of the year.
All right, one last question. We'll wrap it up for everybody. It's a little after 8. Question about are your flies weighted?
No, absolutely no bead heads. The guys that know me at the shows and a lot of the guys that I fish with, they know that I am anti-bead. Not that there's anything wrong with fishing beads, but like I said, I kind of keep what I do a little bit more on the traditional side, but I've just modified it just a little bit, especially with the leader design to help make things a lot easier, so that you're not spending all day on the bank tying knots. So that's so I like to keep it simple. But yeah, definitely no weight. The only weight that I have on the flies is the wire ribbing. That's it.
Cool. Well, I look forward to getting together with this spring, since we missed each other at Edison this last year. And I'm going to switch over to a sort of a closing screen here for us, if I can. And,
hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Dave,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
Hey, and one last thing. First of all, I want to thank you for having me on.
Oh, sure, man.
I actually consider it an honor to come in, because PA Fly Fish is such a great site. There's so many guys on there with so much knowledge that are willing to share their knowledge with the new novice coming on the scene. And that I've been absolutely blown away with that over the years, that guys offering all the advice. And also to you for creating a great thing for us fishermen in Pennsylvania. And of course, to the moderators that that have to interject every once in a while. But it definitely was an honor to come on. And
well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here. And as always, I think the idea and the concept of doing these Zoom calls are a great way to get past the typing that we all do and leave our messages and on the forum, and get a little more connected this way. And of course, right now, this is a great way to bring people from all over the state. And we had a gentleman from California here as well, so that was kind of nice. We got a lot of people differently. Oh, there's Charlie. Charlie Moore's in California. So Charlie, thank you for joining us from California. You're the long distance winner. Okay. Let me just bring up one last slide if I can here. How's that?
There you go.
Okay. So again, thank you everyone for being here. The recording on this is this is the first time I'm recording this a Zoom call. So I'll see what I can do, but I see that it's recording and I'll post it on PA Fly Fish and YouTube. I want to thank Dave for being here. And as his phone number's up there for us, as well as an email address to contact him. I highly encourage you, if you're heading to an area that you're just trying to figure out, you're not sure what you're doing, by all means, as Dave was saying, he lives up that way. Contact him, have him take you out guiding a little bit. He would be more than happy to kind of show you the ropes and what's going on. He shares the stage with Sky Blue Outfitters and Rick, who's on the call as well. And you know what, we're really fortunate in PA Fly Fish to have a whole slew of great people on PA Fly Fish, and people like Dave and who are really, really knowledgeable. So those of you not familiar with the website, because I think some people may have come on from the Facebook page or even on Twitter, PA Fly Fish is a community forum that covers basically fly fishing in the Pennsylvania region. So it's pretty easy to find. All you have to do is type in Pennsylvania fly fishing or paflyfish.com. Hopefully I have a follow-up recording of this on there for everybody. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm looking to next month to bring up another program, which will be for beginners, to talk about mayfly hatches, which will be called Bugs for Beginners in April. So I want to thank everyone for joining me, and look forward to doing it again this month. If you have some other ideas or topics, please, by all means, share them in the forum. And Dave, thanks so much for joining me, and I look forward to catching up this spring. We'll get out in the water, okay?
Great. Hey, and thanks again for being so patient with my technical difficulties.
That's all right.
Everybody knows I'm not that technical. I'm just a regular fisherman, that's all.
Well, you're a wet fly expert, and we'll take that from you. So that was, appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.